I'm going to end this poll. Most people heard about it from the library email, it looks like. Now here's the results for y'all to see. And let's stop that sharing. Did you want me to run? Oh, hold on, I need to pause my, there we go. Does anybody, Jennifer, did you want me to run the garden level poll now?
That I think is a little bit later. Like I said,
Okay.
most of my polls are stated on the slides.
Gotcha. Okay. Just let me know when you want it. All right. Well, we're running on YouTube now, so I think you can go ahead and I'll mute myself.
Okay, thank you, Robin. So welcome everybody to another great garden smarter. We're gonna talk about starting a garden from scratch. Hopefully my slides will get us to talk and share ideas. This is a program that is in partnership with Calvert Library as well as the University of Maryland Extensions and Master Gardeners. So the university does like us to share this page. So we are part of the University of Maryland, connected with the College of Agriculture, and our offices are located in the University of Maryland Extension, who set up the Master Gardener program. And I am a Master Gardener volunteer, and our mission is to support the University of Maryland's extension mission by educating residents about safe and effective and sustainable horticultural practices that build healthy gardens, landscapes, and communities. So this is our discussion outline. We're going to talk about the importance of mapping your property. This is just pretty much just walking around your garden, your yard, trying to figure out the upkeeps, where you want to maybe place a garden, what type of gardens. We're going to be discussing the practices, the techniques, the design of gardening, what plants you want to grow, how you want to grow the plants, what's the difference between a transplant versus direct sow. We are going to talk a little bit about phosphate and how complicated that is, as well as essential tools, and hopefully we'll have time to share each other's tips and tricks. Okay, so this is the first poll, Robin. Garden lover, how long have you been gardening?
Looks like most people have responded, so I'm going to end it so we can see the answers.
Okay. So it looks like it's between the first time and 1 to 5 and 10 years. Okay. And this is the common reason why people start gardening. And I looked it up, I just Googled it. And one source who did a study was Illinois College of Agriculture, Consumer and Environmental Science. And most of the common is want flowers, vegetables, and a specific plant variety. We want to save money or make money, especially if you want to sell fruits and vegetables, add beauty to your landscape, solve landscape problems, which I'm gonna also talk about that as well, like water management, erosion, which is some of the things that we focus through our Baywise program. It's good exercise. It creates family memories, grow and save healthy food, to provide for the household, healthier planet, a learning opportunity. If you do it in a group like a garden society, you want to meet people, it's a way to be creative, and it provides emotional needs and a spiritual connection. Does anybody else have any other reasons besides these why they started a garden?
It's an activity to do with grandchildren.
Yes, yes, and a good opportunity to show them bugs and plants and stuff like that. Anybody else want to share something? Okay, so we'll go to the next slide.
Someone wrote pandemic boredom buster.
Yes, boredom buster. Yes, exactly. And I think that's why we saw a rise. I kept on reading reports of all of the seeds going. I haven't seen that much problem, but I've noticed that a lot of stores have it just seems like they have a lot more seeds, that they're hoping that this year will be very similar. One thing I have noticed, which I'm shocked, is it's very hard to find herb seeds. So I'm not trying to spread or worry, but I'm just wondering if there's a herb seed shortage. So let me tell you a little bit story of my garden story. So I've been gardening in my parents' yard since I was little. But my personal story is my sister and I recently moved into our own home, which includes 1 acre lot. It has a 1930s house, and presently it includes 5 varieties of trees, and a couple of ferns and bulbs. It also included some invasive or aggressive species, which included poison ivy, English ivy, multiflower rose, wild raspberry, and tree of heaven. So my parents' landscape, they never had multiflora roses. So that was a new species that we never had to deal with. The other species I was very familiar with. We also found out that we have an overgrown buffer. So between our property and the main road, it's very overgrown. They really didn't manage it. We have a lot of standing water due to runoff from the driveway and other places. And then we also found out that our neighbors spray. So that was my garden story. Does anybody else want to share their garden story?
I have a question about what you just said, that your neighbors spray.
Yes.
What does that mean? I'm new to all of
Okay, so when your neighbors
terminology.
Okay, and I'm glad you cleared that up. So that's important to know because and it depends on what they're spraying. If they're spraying just to keep their grass growing, that's one toxin, or if they are spraying because of ticks and fleas and other ones. So our neighbors actually spray for ticks, spiders, and fleas. And you have to be aware of that because number one, you need to make sure that no one's outside. Number two, are they spraying when it's windy? Legally, they're not supposed to be spraying when it's windy. The University of Maryland does have like the protocols of how people really should be spraying on their property. And the reason why it's important for us is because then we know, okay, if we don't have any beneficial insects, or we have a garden that is facing theirs, if we notice dead insects, we're like, oh, okay, this is why we're not having so many insects, is because the neighbor is spraying. So that's the reason why I put it on there. Does anybody else have any questions or want to share anything?
Hey, Jennifer, I
Yeah.
just want to say that for us, it's location. When we first moved here, the trees were not very tall, and now they're been here 20 years, and the trees are huge, and so they block a lot of the sunlight. So placing our garden has been a challenge since the trees block a lot of the sunlight.
Yes, and that's what happened with my household that I was born into. My parents have really a lot of problems. They pretty much are built underneath a forest, and them and the neighbors actually started pine trees along the driveways and the outlines of their property. Well, now these pine trees are huger than the house, and so my parents are having problems having a successful vegetable garden because they only have between maybe 4 to 6 hours of sunlight, and depending on the time of day, one part of the vegetable garden will have sunlight in the morning, and then the other part will have sunlight in the afternoon. So they have to really plan which vegetables will do better in the morning versus in the afternoon. So, that also affects what you can grow and when you can grow and etc. Good question. Anybody else?
I have a question. When you were talking about spraying,
Yeah.
so if you spray for your yard and you want it to look nice and so forth, how is that going to affect your garden? Is it going to ruin it? I know you said about the insects and so forth, but what can you do to counteract it?
I'm not going to go too much into it because we do have another garden smarter that will talk about this. But companion planting is one, or using flowers and herbs to get rid of those pests or invite the beneficial insects that will attack those pests. And not for this presentation, but presentations I've done in the past, I found out that there are specific plants and species that actually bring more fleas and ticks into your yard, which I can't think of if any other master gardeners who are here know of those varieties. But I can even put a note for myself to do that research if people are interested in that. But we're talking about when we say neighbor spraying, these are professional sprayers, not necessarily, you doing your yard spray, because once you get into the professional space, you really need to have a license, and you really should have a training that goes through the University of Maryland to really legally use these sprays. The over-counter ones is not. They're still harmful, and you really should look in the direction of the spray you are using. So we're really not talking about over-the-counter sprays.
Got it. Thank you.
No problem. Anybody else?
In the chat, Jennifer, deer came up as an issue. I sent the link to your presentation on deer deterrence.
Okay, good. Thank you. And I think everybody has deer problems. Typically, you can use but really fencing is your big way of preventing them, as well as growing plants that they won't like as much. But if they're hungry, they'll eat anything, even if it's on a list of a deer deterrent. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so I did talk about mapping your yard. So it's pretty much just walking around and seeing the failures as well as the successes of your yard. And I did put a note that you could try finding a satellite image of your yard. Google Maps is a good way to do this. So when you are mapping your property, and sometimes you have to do this in the rain because you get to see what puddles are going. Now, hopefully it'll stop and, the water has drained because you really don't want to compress your soil. But take the time to observe your property, what is going on. You usually do this in the spring, and this is specifically if you are doing a sun mapping, because then it tells you where you get the most sun and where to prepare your vegetable garden. Potential issue areas could be shady, the flood zone, compactable soil, slopes or low areas. And when we say slopes, we're usually talking about a lower level. It's usually extreme more than a lower area. The amount of sunlight, full to part full and sun shade, and then shade. The soil type, do you have loam, sandy, rocky, or clay? And you could even have a mixture of different areas depending on your lot. Do you have an invasive plant on your property? And where is your water source? Does anybody else have any comments about this?
I have a question. Good morning.
Yeah.
My name's Dorothy. Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning.
Could you elaborate on the amount of sun in that website?
Okay, so the Soundcalc.org, you actually can go and visit it, and then it showcases the direction of the sun. So then once you know where your house is located on the map, it'll tell you, okay, this side of the house is the south, this house, it's just so then you can see it. And we're gonna I have a slide that does talk about specifically sunlight, and if you want, I can also visit that website. We can go through it so you can see what it looks like, and we can explore Prince Frederick, since both the library and the extension office is located on that. But it's really good to know where the sun is hitting your property, so then you kind of have an idea when you will have full sun. And really depending on when you have full sun, like if you have full sun on your property in the morning versus in the afternoon, you have trees blocking it, and that also affects your garden as well, because morning sunlight is not as harsh as afternoon sunlight. So, sometimes your vegetables, and with global warming as well, we're starting to see that it's okay to have a couple of trees for your vegetables, because then the sun rays, when they're hitting your vegetables in the afternoon, they're getting enough sunlight to produce, but not so much that it's protecting them.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I would like to see the site if there's time. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, can I just also mention that when you have a vegetable garden, this is Mimi, you need full sun.
Yes.
There are some plants that, like maybe some herbs, that you might be okay with part sun, but you have to know what you want to grow in order to figure out how much sun you need.
Mm-hmm. And usually I think the rule of thumb is vegetables need 6 to 8 hours of sunlight. Anybody else? Okay, so that
I was just going to say, Jennifer, that also you kind of mentioned it, but when you're planting if you're in a vegetable garden, you need to also consider where you're doing it, meaning that you have a perfect spot right now. It has great sunlight, but the surrounding areas you have to consider, are those trees, how fast they're going to grow. Right now you might have full sunlight, but after you've worked your garden, you built your raised beds, worked the soil, and have the perfect garden, and then, you know, in 5 years, those trees are now making it a very shady garden. So you have to consider what's growing near your garden.
Or how long you're going to grow it.
Yes, I agree with both of those. Yes, exactly. And, you know, the reason why you also have to look, like if you're putting a vegetable garden in the spring, right now our sunlight is completely different from what it's going to look like in the summer. Because the sun is moving and different, and researching for a past presentation, that's what I found out was because I kept on trying to do my sun mapping in the summer, and after researching, it said really you should be doing it in the spring.
Right, because right now there's also no leaves on the tree. So if you're doing some cold weather vegetables now, you have full sunlight, but come, you know, June, you can have all those trees blocking the sunlight.
Yes, yes. Anybody else?
Jennifer, this is Diana. I wanted
Diana.
to. Hi, how are you? I
Good.
wanted to reiterate the comment that you made about it's possible to have a really, really nice herb garden in a partial shade area. And I have a very successful herb garden that is gets the late afternoon shade, as you mentioned. So in high summer it gets a shade in the late afternoon, but it's really a successful garden, even including basil. Not as great basil as you get in the full sun, but you know, everything else has worked pretty good there. You know, rosemary, parsley, you know, oregano, all those kinds of things. So if you've got a spot that gets, you know, 4, 5, 6 hours of sun, maybe 6 hours, you can put a lovely herb garden in.
And I actually have an example. When I was this garden that I showed on my garden story, that is actually in the front, and it's near some huge old oak or maple trees, and these are all herbs. And right now that garden, because there's no leaves, are having full sun, but in the summer it is part shade. So you can see, you know, Diane's example that you can have a wonderful herb garden. These are, the red one is a red salvia. The purple one is a Mexican sage, but it's still salvia. Up front is navage and cilantro. And then I believe in the back are varieties of parsley.
It looks great.
Yes. And
We lost your sound, Jennifer. Not hearing you.
We're not hearing her either.
Yeah.
okay, so let's go to the next discussion, problem areas to look for. So you're looking for erosion or runoff, dead grass and trees, fallen trees and branches, mushrooms growing in the lawn, which I had a big problem this year with that. I had to keep on getting in contact with the extension and saying, should I be worrying about this? Standing water, which I'm sure we all will be able to observe after today. Wildlife or neighbors' livestock and domestic animals. The reason why I put this one in is coming in, my sister and I knew that the neighbors have chickens, and we didn't realize that they would be a problem because they like to go in our yard, and each time we put a tree and tried to mulch it nicely and everything, they would come in and demulch it and move the soil around. Also, you are looking for pests and diseases, and again, invasive or aggressive plant species. Anybody else? have any comments about this list or suggestions?
Jennifer, can you talk about the mushrooms growing in the lawn issue?
Okay. So I actually sent them a picture of what was going on, and they replied because I did ask an expert, and everybody has access to this. So if you Google University of Maryland Extension Ask an Expert, you can send in photos or questions, and then there's also a place where you can say, yes, you can share it. So then they can upload it onto their blog. I forget if I clicked that at that time. But anyways, I asked him, is this a problem? Because I just had abundance of mushrooms growing, and they were growing right near my large trees in the front. And I was like, does this mean that, the roots are rotting? They did say that if you see them, there is something rotting on the ground. And so I'm thinking, because especially since I've been able to observe my first good winter, last winter was poorly of observing my new property. So this winter I was able to see that a lot of branches fall from these big trees, and so then maybe that debris is landing on my grass, and so then they're nice and fertile because they've been kind of decaying on the tree, and so then they're bringing this good nutrients to my grass, and so then it's making an abundance of mushroom. But they kept on referring that it's something in your soil is decaying. And as far as I've seen it, my trees' roots are good. They're not rotting. That's not what I'm seeing. What I'm seeing is that whenever I have some of the decay debris from the trees falling, I'm thinking it's coming into my lawn.
Okay, so I support and garden a 13-acre piece of property at our school, and this has been, let's see, this summer will be the first full cycle of a year that I've been starting to do anything of to any great degree with the property. Mm-hmm. So I've just noticed that, like, at the end of the spring, through the spring and into the summer, there'd be mushrooms just growing on, mossy areas, mm-hmm. the grassy areas that, they're not managed, or there are no gardens in there. We have a wide open meadow area. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering, there's a variety of them. I just leave them alone. I haven't tended to them. And I just wonder, is there anything that I need to look at, or those areas are not areas that at this point in time that we will garden? It's their area. They're basically play areas for the kids. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Okay. Was there anything else that you wanted to say?
Well, I just wonder, are they providing me, do I need to, if I look, do I need to look closely at them? Do they provide any information for me? Is there anything that when I look at them, I just look at them, I tell the children not to eat them or not to pick them. Because I don't know what they are, so I'm just wondering if there's any more information I can gather from them, or, about the surrounding area, about the trees. I mean, we do have some big old trees, and right now there's lots of branches that have fallen from them.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm just wondering about that.
I'm not quite sure if the University of Maryland's extension has a mushroom page. We could look to see if maybe the Department of Agriculture or Natural Resources has a site on mushrooms. I will try to do further research on that, but like you said, they like very rich, decaying soil and moist. And when you said that you saw moss, that is the most perfect place for mushrooms to decay. Unfortunately, my area, it had none, so I did not see any moss where my mushrooms were growing. And the only reason why I had to remove them was they were killing my mower. So I said, okay, I cannot be mowing through mushrooms. So I put it, and then my other question for the horticulturist was, what can I do with them? I didn't want to just add them to the landfill. And so they said, go ahead and put it in your compost. And so that's what I did. And they did warn me that sometimes if you add mushrooms, you have to be careful, because then that will hire, I forget which mineral it'll hire into your compost.
I posted the page from the extension office that pretty much says there's no practical or permanent way to eliminate mushrooms. You can remove them, pick them, remove them as they appear.
Yeah.
There's also a comment anyway about copperheads. I don't know if you have any hints about deterring copperheads.
No, I don't. And I've been noticing they've been rising, like the sites have been coming further and further north, I guess, because I know that Prince Frederick has some sightings, and then like around Calvert Cliffs, they've been having a lot of sightings. Most people, they usually say just be aware of them and just don't mess with them. I think there's really no solutions. I think in past I did research, because I was worried if there's any like green way to prevent them from going in your yard. Most snakes like leafy chunks and stuff like that, and that's one negative of using leaf and wood and grass mulching, because you are kind of inviting a habitat for snakes. That's another reason why it's important to move that litter, because then you're number one hiring the decomposing of that material, but you're also moving it enough that hopefully a snake won't come invite it and say, oh, this is a good home. So yeah, I know that they're a real problem, but I'm not really quite sure. And really, my rule of thumb is they're still a beneficial species, and hopefully you'll see black snakes and king snakes on your property, because then if you see those, they are a good eater of copperheads. So that's one beneficial, that if you have problems with copperheads, hopefully you see black snakes, and they're the ones who will eat them.
My neighbor uses a lot of small netting over her plants, and the copperheads get caught up in them every year. We've had a massive load of copperheads in our neighborhood, and it's uprising each year. So last year, between us two, there have been at least 7 copperheads, and the black snakes, we just let them roam around, but it's in a rise in the southern end of the county too. Yeah,
and that's where I've seen the rising too. And that's one negative. I know a lot of master gardeners have put a negative on that, because if you use netting around your trees and stuff, that's also a problem, because the netting isn't. You could have a chance of catching a good snake. How do you dispose those copperheads that you catch?
No comment.
That was the right answer.
Yes, and it's probably not legal either.
Yeah. Excuse me, I have a question about that. So other than the harm to humans and pets and all that for copperheads,
Yes.
does it do anything to your plants? Do they eat your plants?
No, most snakes are after rodents and amphibians. Like, you know, they're really, snakes are not plant eaters. Most of them are meat eater. Even the worm snake, he's after worms. And I also heard with copperheads, the young ones are more deadlier than the older ones, but don't quote me on that. Yeah, I really don't have any info on copperheads, but I can always look for everyone just to see if I can find any quick information about that.
Another problem that was posted was about moss. I posted the page from the cooperative extension, but I don't know if you have anything extra to add.
I guess you either love moss or hate it. It really depends on whether you want, where it's growing, and if you want a lawn. I know as Master Gardeners, we've been promoting to not have as much lawn. We're really trying to get people to grow trees and beneficial plants like our natives. But if it's in an area specifically that you want a lawn, a good tip is going to that extension site that Robin provided. But it also is the key ingredient that it's probably really a moist, shallow place, which it's very hard to grow grass on that. But I think there are species of grass-like plants that would probably be better than your typical grass that could grow better in that wet area. Anybody else?
Well, this is Diana again. I was just, I did come across a couple of little copperheads in my garden, and it's one of the many reasons, you can tell I'm British, that I wear Wellington rubber boots, Wellington boots as they're called in England, while I'm gardening. They just come all the way up to your knee, and you can just put them over your socks and leggings, and it sort of does seem to protect you from lots of things, including ticks and things like that. So, you know, in addition to all the other good things you can do in the garden, just, you know, what you wear can help you a little bit too.
Yes, I agree. So then if it does bite you, you know, you're protected in those layers, and it's likely that you have to go to the hospital.
And the other thing, just on that note, is just think it's really advisable if you're out gardening that you actually know what to do when you get, if you actually do get like bitten by a copperhead. The Mayo Clinic has got this amazing website, just Google it, and it really has lots of good advice on all kinds of things. And I know there's plenty of others, but just knowing ahead of time what to do if you get bitten, you don't need to panic, you just need to know what to do.
I agree. Thank you, Diana. And plus, I think, and I'll look for this too, there's specific times that you can garden as well, that you're less likely to get connected to a snake. So if you garden when they're not as active, that can also be a prevention against snakes as well. Should we move on, it sounds like? Okay. So here are some examples of problems that I was talking about. So the first three images are my standing water and erosion issues. The one that looks just like a pile of dirt and a hole, that is what happens if you decide to dig up a bush or a tree late in the fall and don't replant something afterwards. So a key tip is to always, when you dig up something, put something in. Because then you'll have this erosion issue. And it sounds like someone else has a comment or a question. Okay, I'll keep on going. And then the last one on the top is a picture of one of my trees in the front. It's bark, and the lovely English ivy is growing on that. So that's one that really you shouldn't invite into your landscape. And then the lower images again are lower areas where I'm seeing problems with water escaping from my driveway into the lot, and where I need to raise the soil as well as add plants to it. The one with the snow is where I have seen water gather up and go into the driveway. And then the one near the fence, whenever it rains, and my sister already confirmed that we have a huge puddle. So that's where the driveway water is gathering up close to right where our walkway is. Anybody else have any questions, comments on this slide? Okay, I'll move on. Okay, so sun exposure. The southern heats up early in the spring and receives no direct sun in the summer, full sun in winter. And these are based on what I looked up. Someone can confirm me. I always get confused between which one is warmer. And I'll keep on continuing. The northern exposure slopes or walls is a cold weather microclimate, and we see no direct sun in the winter and full sun in the summer. In the spring and the fall, the sun exposure slowly shifts from between the two extremes. What does each sun exposure means? And this is specifically when you go through a seed packet, this is what they mean. So full sun is 6 or more hours. From 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. is good for your vegetables and fruits. Part sun is 6 or less hours, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. for herbs, leaves, and root vegetables is good. And then full shade, which is usually on the north side of the house and under trees. Morning sunlight is less harsh for sensitive plants like your leaf or your root vegetables. It is able to get rid of the morning dew, and afternoon sunlight is more harsh, and full sunlight plants will survive this location. Anybody have any comments about this slide? And do we have a moment to explore that Soundcalc website?
A quick question from someone who asked about Kathy asked, what is a good solution for the flex hose water? I think that was one of the problems.
Flex hose water. I guess that was in the image of my so that solution, because I've talked to my mom about it. A lot of people say like the flex hoses, the ones with the ripple, whether you should get a solid one, because then you have less likely for mosquitoes to go in there. But really you need to try to move the water as far away of your house. It doesn't have it in one of my pictures, but a couple of my drainages they put underground, and the original builders or who managed this house before me really tried to push the water as far away from the house. The two images, the one towards the driveway and the one towards the propane, that's one thing on my sister or my to-do list is really to change those pipes. Most likely the one near the driveway will have to get a rain barrel, because that's the only solution we have come up with for that place, because it's really narrow. We've tried to dig there. It's very hard, and I'm not quite sure if it's just because they tried to fix a runoff or set any water issues. So it's very rocky in there. So we really can't be doing any digging there. As well as that's where our electric and other sources are there, which makes another bad case. The one with the propane, we're not really quite sure because of the propane being there if we can put a rain barrel there. So most likely we'll probably put a longer pipe and hopefully make it drain further away. But another problem there is a beautiful redbud tree right there, so we're limited to digging there. But on the positive of the redbud being there, it hopefully helps soak the runoff. We're also hoping to introduce other small shrubs and stuff in that area to hopefully get rid of a lot of the water, the sitting water there as well.
Jennifer, this is Diana again. And, you know, one of the issues we've had in our community with these pipes is that because we're on the water's edge, that people that have historically gotten used to that, putting these over the cliff edge or onto the edge of the cliff or the edge of a ravine. And, you know, what we basically found is what that does is it super saturates soil or the cliff edge, and then it collapses the cliff edge or the ravine edge. So it's really important when you put these in to really examine where the waters actually end up going. But it really can't go, it really shouldn't go into directly into a stream or something like that, because it's going to cause significant erosion.
I agree. And also, if you read into, and I'm not quite sure if I put this in water management, but really legally, you're not supposed to allow water to end in someone else's yard as well.
Right.
So you really have to slow that water down, as well as hopefully it goes into the underground water system before it hits a stream. So really it's important to, number one, slow your water, and number two, get it absorbed in your ground. So that could be introducing plants that will absorb that extra water. That's why it's really important. And I would think them doing that, they really are not supposed to be doing that as well, because like you said, it is affecting the cliffs.
Right. Thank you.
And you know, with that as well, it's important if you live in a cliff. Well,
we lost your audio again, Jennifer. I see you trying to talk, but we're not hearing.
You know, while we're trying to get Jennifer, one of the problems we had is that we had, when somebody rebuilt a road in the community, the camber of the road was done the wrong way, so the water was running off onto the cliffside.
Oh no.
And basically it was a tiny fix we put on it, just a little edge buffer to the side of the road, and the water came back on the non-cliff side of the road and got absorbed, just like you were saying, into the ground along people's homes, and not going right along into the cliff. So it was a big plus, a very small fix.
Very good. Excellent. Anybody else? Thank you for that story. That was really inspiring, and why it's important to slow that one off, and why buffers are so important.
There were a couple of, let's see, there was a question about rain gardens, and so we've posted the rain garden registration event that will be coming up next month. And so let's see, 2 more questions. One was, how do you keep the mosquitoes away from rain barrels in the summer?
So I know if a rain barrel is properly designed, they should have a netting to prevent them from going there. I think some people have said that they have like something that moves the water when it's just sitting, because motion water prevents the mosquitoes from going in there. And hopefully you will use that rain barrel to water your flowers, not your vegetables, especially if it's connected to a roof. I have read that if you have a rain barrel, which this is what my sister and I are hoping to do, because even though between our house and our garden, it's not that far, but still it's a lot to try to bring water from the house to the vegetable garden. So we're hoping that we can put a rain barrel there, and because it's coming directly from the sky and it's not going through the roof, that'll be okay to use for our vegetables, which I've read that that's okay. It's just not okay when you have a rain barrel connected to a roof, because the water, before it goes into your rain barrel, goes through your roof, and the roof has several harmful minerals and stuff that you do not want to expose to plants that you will be eating.
And then there was a question that says, from Nikki, saying, our summers are really hot. Should full sun plants be moved during the peak of the day? Just her flowers don't tolerate heat so much.
Yeah, probably, especially if you're doing container gardening. Yes, or you can put them where they're getting the morning sunlight, since we see that morning sunlight is less harmful than the afternoon sunlight. So that you can keep in mind. And plus, you can also add organic material to your flowers. So then if the soil is exposed, then the water gets evaporated by the sun faster. So if you cover it up with organic matter, and I'm talking about like organic mulches, like wood, really fine wood mulch, or leaves, or even your grass clippings, or you can even use a cover crop. As long as that soil is not being exposed, then you have less likely that the water will be escaping, and so then that also helps your plants as well. And if you're having problems with the flowers, maybe even grow something that is taller than them, so then when the afternoon hits, they will shade the plants as well. So I'm going to go, if we have time, we'll visit the Soundcalc at the end, just so then we don't run out of time. Okay, so our next poll is garden type. What type of garden do you have, or you're hoping to put in this year? And so while everybody's doing the poll, so I have examples, and these are not the limited garden types. I'm sure there's a variety of types that I have not included in this presentation, but these are the ones that we either have had talks about in the Master Garden program, or that I'm focusing. So vegetables, herbs. There's an example of a great rain garden located in North Beach called the Sunrise Garden. There's a flowers, wildlife. This picture is from the American Chestnut Man Trust, and they have a food forest. And it looks like most of us are doing a vegetable, or herb, or floral. And then a water, which is usually a pond. And we haven't had that discussion for a while, but I'm not going to include that one. And one comment I wanted to talk about American Chestnut Man Trust. They have so many examples of different gardens. They almost have every single one except for the rain and the water. So if you need an example of a vegetable garden or herb garden or a floral garden, they're one place that you can go and see an example of a garden type. Did anybody else have any comments, questions, suggestions about this? And the only comment I want to also be, I'm gonna mention it at the end, is that like Robin said, we should be having a rain garden discussion next month. And did I hear someone else want to make a comment?
I think it's just feedback from someone who is unmuted.
Okay. Okay, so this is how my sister and I built our gardens. So we really didn't have much, and because of other maintenance of the house, we had to use what the property had. So we primarily used compost, grass clippings, and shredded leaves. The compost was the only big expense that we did last year, and basically we got leaf growth, and we got it in bulk versus the bag. That we found that if you have someone who has a truck, that is the cheapest way to go. And so we got an order of that, and then we decided to we probably overkilled gathering our grass clippings because we were just so desperate to start a garden last year. This year, because your yard really needs those shredded grass clippings, we're probably gonna do it every other mowing, and then in the summer we'll probably not collect those grass clippings because it just got too hard to try to gather them. And then how we started our vegetable garden was we first layered either cardboard or newspapers. Then we did our grass clippings or shredded leaves. And then where we wanted to plant, we tried to put it all in the yard, but then that was using too much of the compost. So we, or the organic matter mix. So then we started using just that type of soil where we wanted to plant it, and that was much better, and we weren't going through it. And then once, if we were seeding, we didn't do this, but if we were planting a transplant, we would mulch around the plant to preserve the soil. Did I hear another feedback?
So there was a question about if your grass is commercially treated with pesticides or fertilizer, should you not use those clippings?
Nope, then you can't use those clippings, because then that means that that chemical is in your grass clippings. So if you don't do any of that, yes, go ahead and use your grass and your leaf clippings. And when I say shredded leaves, you put it through a mower, and you don't want to do that. The last time you want to gather your leaves is early fall, because by late fall you really should keep them on the ground. And I'm not quite sure what specific date you're not supposed to, but we're probably gonna let them stay until we see the insects emerging, because one good thing about keeping your leaves down is that they're good homes for the caterpillars and the beneficial insects larvae. And so that's what we did. We have not gathered our leaves from the trees. The only ones we gathered was the first falling last fall. And we haven't even clipped any of the clippings of plants. Like if there's a wood stock on it, we haven't clipped any of that. We'll probably start doing that late spring, closer to summer. We'll start clearing that, because then we know that the beneficial larvae have submerged and have exited their winter homes. And then, is that another feedback that? Okay, and so my sister was the main one who built the herb garden. So she told me how she built it. So we did purchase some transplants. We really did any seeding, and if it was seeding, she actually started them indoors. And then once they were at a certain stage, then she directly planted the herbs and then surrounded, and she built the herb garden directly into the soil, and she did use some of that good compost or leaf little soil that we got that to put with the plants so that they would have a good nutrition. And then we surrounded each one with a layer of newspaper and organic mulch, which was either grass clippings or shredded leaves.
Hey Jen, we put in the chat that we've been getting compost by the yard from a place in Davidsonville, and it's usually pretty good. We've probably gotten maybe 10 times last year. It's on Obligation Farms. It's pretty inexpensive. It's only $20 a yard.
Yep. Yeah, we go to Hatchers, which is in Huntingtown. I know we're not supposed to promote that, but they're good. And what we like about them is they will not sell either the topsoil or the leaf grow if we have had rain. So they want people to be able to haul good material. And they also, most of them, which I'm sure your source as well does this, have a mixture as well. So if you don't want complete a leaf-based compost, or you don't want a topsoil, you can actually mix them in. And we experience both of them, and they're in good quality.
And there's a question just asking for clarification about what sets are versus starting seeds. Is sets another name for transplants or seedlings that you buy from a farm or nursery?
Yes, sets are, and I think sets usually are bare-rooted plants, whereas transplants, usually you're thinking of ones that are sit in soil. So I think that's what we're usually saying, transplants. Transplants are usually ones that are in the soil, and then sets are either bulbs or right now I know Walmart is selling bare-rooted plants as well. And I know we're not supposed to be promoting anything, but that's what I'm observing. And a lot of times, if you get sets or you're able to get bare-rooted plants, they're much cheaper than the transplants. Anybody else? Comments, suggestions?
When you buy onions, they're usually in sets.
Yes, as well as I believe garlic is also in sets, and that's how they're usually sold. And then if anybody has any questions on buying sweet potatoes,
You're gone again, Jennifer.
Not hearing you, Jennifer.
sweet potatoes at Walmart, and it just looked like a sweet potato. And of my understanding and how my went before I moved, how my household bought sweet potatoes, we actually got their bare root. So that was a good conversation. Anybody else?
Jennifer, will you repeat that again? We lost you and we didn't hear the whole.
Okay, so I had questions during last Garner Smarter on container gardens, and the discussion was on sweet potatoes, how you really should grow sweet potatoes. I'm not very familiar with that, and I saw the last time I went to Walmart was they were selling sweet potatoes, and it was not bare root sweet potatoes. So if you want to find more about sweet potatoes, look at the recording on container gardens. It's, I think, closer to the end during the Q&A session. Anything else? Should we go on? Okay. So planning practices. So again, there is a recording through the library about our garden smarter on container gardens. So I would suggest, if you have an interest in that, to really view the recording. Is that another feedback?
There was a question about where you purchased sweet potato slips.
I'm not really quite sure. I think the slips, since sweet potatoes are not yet, usually if you're getting the bare root or the slips, they should not be selling them right now because it's not the season for them. I think most of the time, the ones, you know, like the garden stores, they just don't have it. I know Walmart just has the sweet potato, and personally I would not get that, especially if this is your first time. I think it really would be beneficial to get either a transplant or a bare root.
I believe Hatcher's sells the potato and sweet potato, but they haven't gotten any of their stuff yet.
Yeah, because I think they're not in season yet.
I believe you plant potatoes like right around St. Patrick's Day. I believe there's something that you have to put in by St. Patrick's Day, and I think it's potatoes.
And then I'm looking at the University of Maryland's calendar, when to grow things, and it does say that it's supposed to be a transplant, and they're saying May 20th to June 10th.
Okay.
Is their suggestion when you should start thinking about sweet potatoes. And so I'm very familiar about the in-ground because that's what how my dad liked to do his vegetable gardens. And commonly tilling is used in here, but we really suggest to not till. My sister and I have been doing the raised bed.
We lost you again, Jenny.
should be 30 feet, or measure how extent you can get access to your plants. We really don't want you to be stepping in the raised bed. That's why they're 3 feet. You can make them as long as you want, but we just want limited stepping into them. That's why the short 3 feet width. Anybody else? Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So in a previous presentation, I did look just to see if Home and Gardens had any videos on some of the methods, and they do. So they have a no-tilling garden, types of raised beds, intensive planting, which really discussed on the square footage gardening. That's why I include that text. They also have one on container gardening, and then a vertical gardening, which is really mainly focused on hydroponics. And they've been trying to record their lecture series as well. And I would suggest to go and visit their YouTube. And was that another feedback?
There was a question about why is tilling not suggested?
So tilling, number one, disturbs your vertebrates and all of the beneficial insects in the ground, as well as it affects the what is it called? If another master gardener can help me explain this.
I think it affects the chemicals and how water is absorbed into the soil, and it compacts the soil when you till. Usually what happens when you're using a tiller, it's actually taking down the topsoil further down and not really bringing it up. So what you're really, and so when you're tilling, if you're going to do an implanted garden, it's highly recommend that you do a soil test before you plant anything. If you're doing direct sow versus if you are doing a raised bed or a container garden, you don't have to do that soil test. But if you're doing a tilling or direct sowing into the soil, it's recommended to do a soil test. But yeah, tilling breaks up how the soil is created. It imbalances the natural nutrients. It disturbs the microorganisms that are currently living into the soil. And so with tilling, you have to constantly feed the soil with growing things and leaving the bare roots into your soil. You also have to do a cover crop every year. If you're going to till every year, you have to also put in compost and leaf grow into the soil every year. So tilling is a lot of work too.
Jennifer, this is Diana, and this is one of the things that I think it's a relatively new thing for people, for me certainly, to understand, that because people have been rototilling and digging up their gardens for years, and it seems like a really good way to get rid of like stuff, weeds and things that are growing. But I think over the last many years, we've all come to, or we're coming to understand that it's such a really bad thing for our soil, and it ruins the structure. It turns up the weed seed, so you've got constant weed. You're constantly having to feed it. So it's really important to try and not do that kind of tilling on your land. It's going to really benefit it over time.
Yeah, and I agree. And you got the specific, the how it's structured, because that's what's compressing is. You're you're
Right.
disturbing the structure of soil.
Right.
Thank you, Elisa. And thank you. You guys both nailed it. Thank you. Okay, planting technique. So intercropping is mixing it up, mixing your flowers, your herbs, and your vegetables. We are going to have another Garnet Smarter. He's going to talk about this. That's companion planting. Layering. Okay, am I having enough feedback? Okay, so layering is kind of like if you see a what is it called? Like a field or something. It's mixing up the layers, so the tall things with the medium height to the covered crop height plants. It's really mixing it and designing your garden based on height. And then the lasagna method is what I've been really trying to promote and talk about how I created my gardens. There's also another one that I didn't include, which is succession planting, and it is after one crop is harvested, another is planted in the same space. If you missed our raised bed presentation, he really talks about that. So that's another presentation to review. Anybody else? Comments?
Just to clarify, we had a specific question about what do you do a virgin piece of land if you can't till? And I think the lasagna method can go straight on the grass, right?
Yep. And that's my problem too, is before we moved in, we had to get a new what is it called? I'm going blank. Lisa, you might need to help me. But anyways, a new septic tank and a new all that. And so then it reduced where we could do the vegetable garden. And the vegetable garden is like a couple feet away from it, but it's getting really close. So we couldn't really till the garden, worried that we could disturb our new septic and the water field and all that. So the best way is doing the lasagna method. Any other questions, suggestions?
If you were trying to do a pollinator meadow, is that would you do lasagna? I mean, usually that's scattering seeds or something.
Yeah, that's scattering seeds. And I know that because I've been watching a couple of documentary and there is a new tool. I know farmers have it, but I would think there would be a smaller version where it's basically scraping the ground and then it's planting on the ground level, and it's barely, really tilling the ground. It's really scraping the earth, putting the seed in, and then barely covering the seed. So they could easily do that. I would think they would be able to do that, or maybe even mix the seed with soil and then just spread the seed that way as well. But I'm not quite sure if that's the proper way to do it under the extensions guidelines. But I would think that would be the only way. And there's like little kid craft that that's basically you do. You create a muddy pod, put a seed in there, and then just throw it. Okay, I'm going to move on. Okay, so planting design. So typically with the in-ground process, you're looking at all in the row, but you don't have to just stick in there. You can design your garden by blocks, or you can go up vertically. And to go vertically, you can use rope, tomato cages, a ladder, a pallet. There's so many ideas online on inexpensive trellises. You can grow on a wall. There's a spiral, and I believe on the Calvert Library's YouTube, we do have a recording of our spiral garden smarter, as well as, we have the container garden smarter recording as well. Does anybody have any other suggestions of planning designs? Okay, I'm gonna keep on going. So what are you planning? And this is the next poll. So you can either grow trees and shrubs, annuals and perennials. That can also include biennials, but we're not getting into that. Herbs, vegetables, and natives. And then I do have one side that talks about beginner vegetables, but the extension suggested beans, cucumbers, lettuces, summer squash, peppers, and tomatoes. Peppers and tomatoes really need to be transplants. Cucumbers and squashes can also be transplants, but you can also direct that. And it looks like we're all growing vegetables. And some of us are growing annuals and perennials and herbs. Very good. And then lettuces and beans really need to be direct sowers. Does anybody want to share what they're going to be growing?
Hi there.
Yes.
So I'm actually going to be doing an experiment this year because I had always thought that beans were supposed to be direct sown, but in the Garden Smarter class 2 weekends ago, the one where it was planting 3 vegetables in 1 year or something like that, the presenter said that he actually starts his beans inside. So I'm going to do an experiment where I start half of the beans I want to grow inside and then do the other half direct sow just to see if there's a difference.
Okay. Well, and that's one thing of fun about gardening is always experimenting. But I've heard that some vegetables don't transplant as well as others. And there's a couple of fun YouTubes that show how, like, if you want to grow beans or peas, which commonly is known that they are hard to transplant, that there's a way to grow them without really not an easy way of transferring them. So I can share that video as well. And then on my notes for these slides, I do also have a link on suggestive trees and shrubs from the Department of Natural Resources that I can share with everybody. And I am going to send the library my resources and the slides as well, and anything that we discussed today. And did anybody else want to share anything of what they're planning on growing? Okay. So this is what we're planning on growing. So hopefully soon we'll start, like I said, scraping where we want to. They really do suggest to not unearth or really, if you have a lawn and you want to grow something else, they really say don't show bare ground, because if you have bare earth, I showed earlier what happens, and you can have really some erosion and sitting water issues. So we're going to try that, barely scraping the ground and sowing our natives, like the black-eyed Susans and the coneflowers, and maybe even a native mix. My household tried to transplant sunflowers, and after doing some research, I found out that sunflowers are one of the plants that really do not like being transplanted. And this is from a pot to the outside. We did have success when we found a sunflower growing outside and we wanted to move it where it was growing, it was okay to be transplanted that way. But if you're going from indoor sowing to outdoor sowing, they really don't like it that much. And tomatoes and peppers, you really should start indoor sowing or buying a transplant. Zucchini, you can direct sow. Pumpkin, you can direct sow. Melons, you can direct sow. And parsley, lovage, you can start indoor seeding. And then rosemary, lavender, and sage all are like the woody herbs. And I would suggest, especially if you are a beginner gardener, to get transplants, because they are very temperamental, and there's a lot of steps trying to seed them. Like I found out that lavender, in order to seed them, it takes them at least 21 days just to germinate. That they do need to have sun germination. They might need a little cool spell, but not much. So there's a lot of involvement with those. So I would heavily suggest, if you're a beginner gardener, to get a transplant of those. Okay, so since we were talking about transplant versus direct sow, so I have a list of suggestive transplants, and the Brassicaea, those are the cabbage family. So your cabbage, your broccoli, your Brussels sprouts, they really should be transplants. I think it's because it takes forever for them to grow. And then again, like I said, rosemary's and lavenders you really should buy as a transplant. And then you can go ahead and direct sow your squashes, your pumpkins, your melons, your cantaloupes, your peas and beans, and your corn and sunflowers. One thing about corn is, if you don't have a lot of sun, I would say don't try to grow them, as well as they're in the grass family, and so they need a lot of water. Anybody else have any comments about this? Do you have
Jennifer,
something to say?
just letting you know that we're at 11:30.
Okay, yeah, I see that. That's why I'm speaking it. Did you have something to say? Okay, I'm going to keep on going. This is what I found out that they suggest again. Remember, some of these are transplants, specifically your tomatoes and your peppers, and whereas a lot of them are direct sowing. I was surprised when they said any root vegetables, because I haven't had a lot of luck on carrots. Radishes I've grown okay, but carrots I've had issues. And the other day I found a YouTuber, and she suggested that carrots really do not like heat, and that you really should be starting them in the cooler months. And the extension calendar, because I have a copy of it near me, suggests that you start the carrots between April and June. Okay, and then the herbs, here's a list of herbs. Again, I would suggest if you're a beginner gardener to do them as transplants. And then here's the natives. As you can see, I did put on how to start them through seed, but a lot of them need stratification. So that means that they either need to be in a refrigerator between 60 to 120 days. And then a lot of them, because naturally they fall to the ground, they need the sun in order to germinate. So if you are a beginner on natives, I would say get a bare root or a transplant for these varieties, because they're just so hard to grow. And then I just doing a quick research on coneflowers. It'll take 3 years just for them to, if you grow them by seed, just for them to start blooming. So that's another factor in mind, that, you know, maybe it's beneficial just to get a transplant or a bare rooted plant from these. And a lot of our local, if we get plant sales, a lot of our local plant sales offer these native plants. And then here are flowers that are suggested. Again, I would say transplants is the best way to go for these, even though these flowers are not as difficult as the natives to grow from seed. And then my mom's done a lot of bulb presentation. So I asked her what are the best bulbs to grow or the easiest. So these are the suggestions. And if you have problems with mold or voles, daffodils, we really should be planting with the rest of your bulbs, because hopefully they'll reduce that. Anybody else have comments about this?
Could you repeat that information about bulbs and voles?
Okay, so I know a lot of us, like, our bulbs get taken away by the voles. It's not the moles. The moles are the ones who dig the holes. They are the meat eaters of that group. The voles are the ones that are taking your bulbs. So the voles are using the moles' holes to get your bulbs. So the best way to do that is to grow daffodils among your bulbs, because daffodils are highly toxic, and so they will not go after. I shouldn't say they won't go after, but it's less likely that you'll have that problem if you mix the rest of your bulbs, like particularly your tulips, with daffodils.
Okay.
Someone asked about whether you need to pull bulbs in the winter.
I haven't. I know specific bulbs require you for that, but as long as you put a good organic on top or mulch, and it's not in a place where they're going to have sitting water, you shouldn't have a problem.
Jennifer, the only one that I've had experience with in terms of needing to dig is some of the dahlias.
Yeah,
yeah.
And I think my sister did it this year as well, because again, we just recently moved, and so we really planted them wherever we could fit them. We're hoping, you know, with dahlias, as long as they're not getting wet and you cover them and they're in a good sunlight, since our winter, maybe not this winter, has been so mild that they'll survive outside. But, you know, if you don't have a good sunlight, or they're not being covered to protect that bulb, then yeah, you should probably bring them in.
That's good. I'll
And
try
by
covering.
by covering it, you mean mulching them really well, right?
Yes, like yeah, mulching them really well.
Jennifer, does that apply to corms like irises, which should or shouldn't be totally covered?
Yeah, because bulbs are really tricky. Since my mom, since she's the one, do you have any take on that?
So what was the question?
The question was, should we cover, I mean, I generally don't cover my irises because they're, as I understand them, more like corms. So I don't cover them with mulch in the winter time. I don't really do anything and they seem to be fine. And I'm just wondering, should I be covering them with mulch?
No, you should not be covering iris because they need to be more like on the surface. You really shouldn't even mulch them. I mean,
right.
They should just be out there.
Right, and they're fine.
And they're fine,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, hostas are fine.
Yeah.
The daffodils and daylilies seem to be fine in our area.
Okay.
But I guess we're talking about warmer bulbs. To protect them, you either take them out or you have to put an organic matter on top of them. But most of the bulbs that survive here, they really shouldn't be covered by a mulcher, and they prefer that, not to be heavily mulched. Okay, does everybody know their fall state? Okay, so I'm going to quickly do this one. So based on the extension's website, here's the frost state. Now this is very complex because if everybody remembers, last year we still had frost in May. So my usual rule of thumb is usually they say 3 to 5 days. If your low isn't below 40, then you're good to go. But with our weather being fickle, I've been saying, okay, if my lowest 40 is a week, then I'm good to go. And for my area, I'm still a zone 7A. And what they're saying for my area is February 2nd to May 17th could be the end of my frost state. So as you can see, that is a big gap. So for me, I would say May 17th, or unless we start warming up and I have more than 7 days of the lowest being above 40. That's usually a good rule of thumb, because when I kept on doing it for every 3 days, I had to keep on jumping. So then I said, okay, fine, I'll be good if it is a week. Does anybody else have any say on this? We're almost done, so that's why I'm trying to speed up.
Jen, what do the percentages mean on the top?
So the percentage means that I believe it was the highest that we got the frost. So April 29th, I think, was, if I can remember, that was the earliest that we didn't have the frost, whereas the highest, I think, is that. But you would, I'll provide the link and you can read more what those percentages are about. But I think it is like the highest is like April 1st. That is the least that we've seen a frost date, whereas 10% I would go for, because then that is more likely that you would get that frost date.
Okay, so what it means is that 90% of the time you get frost, let's say in Huntingtown, April 1st.
Mm-hmm.
And so 10% of the time, only 10% of the time did we get frost on April 29th. So the more reliable time would be the 10%.
Okay,
Mm-hmm. Which is April 29th. Thank you. And like I said, we have to remember last year we got frost in May, and what makes me remember that is because we had tomatoes and they were growing out of their pot, and all of a sudden we got this frost, and I mean, we didn't warm up until June, and so we had these abundance of tomatoes that we couldn't put out.
And if I remember last year, a couple of people had put tomatoes before May 1st and they lost 50% of them.
Yes. So that's why we say keep an eye on your lower temperatures. And when we talk about lower temperatures, we mean the night temperatures, because that is the time frame when we have our lowest temps right now for this time of year. Okay, so I have a list of gardening tools, and the ones that are highlighted are the ones that I personally found out that I really needed, because when we moved in, thankfully the previous owners gave us a spade, a shovel, a rake, and that was it. And so then when we started needing a garden, we found out, okay, we really needed a hoe. Thankfully, we, before we moved, my parents surprised us with a small hands toolkit, which included a trowel and a cultivar. And then they also gave us a hori-hori knife, which is good, like if you want to put bulbs in, or like the soil is really compacted, that's good. But if you don't have it, it's not going to be the end of the world. So I really found out that I really needed a hoe. And then for pruning, if you have hand pruners or a pruning saw, is my opinion a good tools that you must have. And the first biggest shopping that we did for our garden last year was a wheelbarrow. And after we got a really good wheelbarrow, it came really in handy. And then if you have a hose nozzle, that's really good. Instead of a watering can, I would say get a hose nozzle. Does anybody else have anything? Okay, and then gardening on a budget. This is my suggestions. Get secondhand tools when you can. And you can get those like for through yard sales or estate sale. Sow your own seeds when you can. Buy bare root plants. Ask family and friends for free plants. If someone has abundance of something, ask around. I already said go to plant sales. Most master gardeners have plant sales. Historic gardens have plant sales. Support your local nurseries. Include a leaf grow or go by the truckload. That's much cheaper. You can use 5-gallon buckets as long as you drill a hole in the bottom. As containers, they're much cheaper than sometimes a garden pot is. And look for sales on items you will need. So a lot of times gardening products are on sale when they're not being used. So last year I kept on having reaction to poison ivy, and I was trying to do the cheap way by pulling them. And so when I was supposed to spray, it was like I couldn't find it, or it was too expensive. So then I found out when they were having on sale and when you really shouldn't be using poison ivy spray. And that was when I saw the sale. So that's my example of look for things when they're on sale, because even if you can't use it right away, you'll have it for next year's garden.
And then, does anybody want to share their tips and tricks? One tip I have is, this is Elisa. Last year when I was starting flowers from seed, I did them outside when it was starting to look sunny. And I did much better doing, plants that require warmth, doing it outside in some containers and then transplanting those containers into the beds that I wanted them. So that's one trick that I would suggest is if you don't have any place to start your warm flowers, I would do them in little pots and then plant them later. Anybody else?
There was a question about whether you can use the same soil from the previous last year's garden.
Okay, so the last garden farm on containers talked about this, but I will reiterate what he said. He said yes, but it's always a good practice to incorporate organic matter or new soil, so you can replace maybe a third or a half of it, just so then you continually work on it. He also said that sometimes they do restart in their pots. And so he empties all of the containers and then they put new material, or they empty it in somewhere and then they incorporate good organic matter like a leaf grow or compost and mix it in and then put it back in the pots. And he also mentioned that they clean the pots outside, especially those cloth bags, those cloth garden pots outside. He really suggested do not put it through your washing machine. Also, if you're going to reuse, this is Elisa again, if you're going to reuse the soil from your containers, you shouldn't plant you need to note what you planted the previous year. So you don't want to plant a squash again if the container had a squash in there. You want to try to rotate what type of vegetable you're growing in your containers, because say that particular squash got a pest, what's going to happen is any squash that you plant in that pot will also get that that pest. So you want to rotate your vegetables if you're growing in containers or growing in a raised bed. And that could be also the negative reason why you shouldn't reuse and mix your potting soil as well. It's better to either empty it, you can put it in a raised bed, and then give it some good new potting soil, and then that way you're not wasting so much, but you're putting new material in your pots.
Okay.
Anybody else? Any more tips and tricks? Okay, since we're reduced to time. So here's a little bit of mine. I'm sure I probably said a lot of these. So limit bare earth. If you remove a plant, you have to replace it. Put in your native seeds in a refrigerator for 30 to 120 days. I said 60, but you have the idea, especially if you are going to direct seed them outside. To spend money on good tools, do not go on the dollar store. One example of this is my sister and I experienced. There are grow bags which were basically made out of plastic at the dollar store, and by the end of the season they decayed. So if you're gonna spend money on tools, really do your research, find good tools, or the best tools we've had was ones that we got through estate sales and yard sales. Always condition your soil with compost or organic matter
plan ahead on what you will transplant versus direct sow. So always have a calendar or a list of seeds. I'm always collecting a list of seeds. So then I know what I want to grow or what I'm interested in growing. Have a plan and document your garden, what you want to plant and where. Know what maintenance and care is required for each plant. My example is tomatoes remove their suckers. My interesting story of that is my sister and I didn't realize we had to do that. And so our tomatoes over and outgrown the raised beds that we had them. And so then we, even though they were healthier plants, they just took over and overcrowded our peppers. So that's one story I have for that. Anybody else?
This is Dorothy again. So could you elaborate, please, on why you want to refrigerate the seeds? Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, no problem. So the reason why you have to refrigerate, particularly we're saying native seeds, is they need that moment of stratification. Even some of the natives that said, well, Whitty, there's no harm, especially if you have a native seed or flower mix. Some of these flower mix seeds do have natives and they need that stratification. And when we talk about stratification, they need that cold, wet time. And usually that's between 30 to 120 days. And so you're trying to speed the process, especially if you end up not spreading them in the fall. Some sources did say you can spread these mixes in the spring, but they really need that cold and wet moment to germinate. And like I said, some of them also need sunlight in order to germinate. And that's why I really heavily suggest transplants if you're a beginner garden for natives to start. Now, unfortunately, if you want like a rain garden, like the image that I have for the program, really the easiest for that is to direct seed. But again, you need to remember that most of them need that stratification, that element between cold and wet.
Thank you. So I have a quick question. So do you need to cut them? Like when you stratify, remember one of your classes, like you sort of cut them. Do you do that before you put them in the refrigerator? I mean,
so that is scarification. Scarification is different, and there is a P that you do that. What is that called? That you have to do that you basically are scraping the seed in order to that. I believe that's scarification. Stratification is really letting the cold and the wet element do that. And I've also heard some people with their seeds, they have mixed like a soil mix and mix the seeds with that, and then that's how they've started. And a couple of the trees that I have started through nuts, I've done that. I've put them in like seed starting mix. That's what I'm thinking. Seed starting mix. Put the nut in there, and then barely made the soil wet and put them in the bag and put them in the refrigerator. And that's how I started some of my trees. Whether I was able to completely grow those trees is another story, but I've heard you can do that as well.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. So our upcoming Garnet Smarters, if you really want to explore specifically on some of the garden types that we really barely talked about, I would suggest to sign up and register for those, as well as we talked about a lot of previous garden types. The recordings are on YouTube through the library. So the upcoming one is saving pollinators. So those are the pollinator gardens and the wild gardens that we were talking about. So that one's going to be talked on March 20th. And then there's going to be a rain garden, and that one's going to sounds like it's going to be really good. That one's going to explore several of the rain gardens that you can go and see, as well as how to establish one in your yard. The companion planting. So if you want to incorporate plants in your garden, that is another good one. And also, if you want to not use so much pesticides, I would suggest to do the companion planting as well, because that is using plants in order versus the pesticides. And then we also have our virtual tour of the Master Gardener and Demo Garden, which is located in Prince Frederick in May. And then we have a intergrowing garden. So that is almost similar to our discussion, but it's more like no fuss gardening. And that one's in October. And then here are some of the resources which I am going to include in that resource document that I just wanted to highlight. I believe the library has all of these resources above. And then I am also going to include a link to all of these documents that I have in my garden notebook. I really like the high and moaning plant chart. I'm not promoting the seeds, but I really do like their calendar because it includes the soil temperature. So it gives you really a good idea of which vegetables are cool crops, so ones that you really should be growing in the spring and the fall, versus the warm crops like tomatoes and peppers. The University of Maryland also has their own vegetable crop calendar, but you have to keep in mind that their dates are really for Central Maryland because that's where their home base is, as well as besides Baywise having a yardstick for your yard, they also have a garden yardstick that might also help. And then they also have a what to do and when little tri-corner busher. And then I also wanted to bring to the attention that besides borrowing the native plants for wildlife habitat and conservation landscape booklet, it's also in a great digital website that I think is more user friendly. And I'm going to also provide that link as well. And then here are some of the other programs that the University of Maryland Extension and Master Gardeners are available to you. And I want to thank everybody for taking part in this conversation. I hope everybody learned something. I hope everybody's questions were able to be answered and asked. And thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer, and all the Master Gardeners who put on this series. The library loves doing it with y'all. You provide great information for our community.
Yes, and I know some people wrote notes and the questions, so hopefully I will get those questions and I'll include them with the documents that I will send.
Thanks.
Thank you.